All right. Tony's going to keep the camera on you, Lindsay, while we
great.
feed our faces.
Okay.
You ready?
Absolutely. Lauren, will you let us know where we're starting at?
Yes, we're starting with finance on page 68.
All right. Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Morning.
So this is going to be the most interesting thing you've seen in days.
All right.
Oh, absolutely. So we're going to cover a lot today. As you can see on this slide, we're going to talk about finance, the operations of the division itself. Then we're going to move to budgeted transfers, and we'll talk about why those matter and why we budget those. The contingency reserves, bond and interest, which again is our debt service. We'll talk about interest bank arena, economic development, and then WSU. So we're going to be moving through your book quite a bit, and I apologize in advance for that. So the finance mission is to assure accurate financial reporting and informed planning and decision making through continuous employment of best practices to ensure effective and proper stewardship of public resources. And we already talked about all of the things we're going to cover, but you'll see that within finance operations, we're actually going to talk about a few groups: CFO, accounting, budget, and purchasing. So the total budget responsibility for finance is just under $60 million. However, you can see on kind of the right side of the slide there, our day-to-day operations are really only about $8 million of that total portion, or about 13%. So on page 68 of your binders is where we start with finance operations. And again, within our office, we have 4 core functions associated with Division of Finance Operations themselves. We also have economic development, but we'll talk about that later in the presentation. So within the CFO's office, we have 7.25 FTE positions that provide strategic planning, capital planning, division oversight, tax system oversight, contract management, internal financial audit, and safety and risk management coordination. And of course, as you just heard on Wednesday, the CFO's office is also responsible for contracting out our mandatory state audit. Then for accounting, we have 16 FTEs who oversee and process revenue and expense transactions. And of course, probably all of our favorites is payroll. We have 2 folks up there who make sure all of our 3,000 approximately employees get paid every 2 weeks. We also have folks who, of course, pay for services to our vendors. And this is pretty important, again, because many of our providers are local, right? Many of our vendors are local, small, and cash flow is important for them. And so we try and focus on that. We also ensure in accounting the timely completion of the CAFR and oversee the workers' compensation program. And we do have a self-funded workers' comp program, and that's approximately $2 million of that total, just about $8 million that you saw, and we have 1 employee who oversees that. Within budget, of course, we have 5 FTEs who provide you with that financial forecast. They start from scratch every year in January. And then do 5-year projections for you. They oversee and implement the budget that you all want developed and then monitor it after it is adopted, and do lots and lots of reports for you so that you always know where we stand. And then finally, purchasing has 8 FTEs that oversee and implement Charter 68, which of course is your purchasing and contracting policy, and all of the other procurement activity that may not rise to the level of formal processes. So as we talked about finance operations, you can see how that breaks out by total, and we'll get into each of those categories as we move through this presentation. So first, focusing on the CFO's budget request, you can see that on page 72. Of course, the CFO's office has the same mission statement as the rest of finance. And you can see the programs that are operated through the CFO's office, which we've already talked about at a fairly high level. I would highlight that the contract management and the internal financial audit functions are relatively new to finance in the last few years, based on initiatives for the organization. So within the CFO's office, we actually have 3 different funds that we work out of. Of course, the county's general fund. And you can see that in 2019, we have an asterisk basically to explain that we have an extra $200,000 in our budget, again related to that contract management system that we're standing up as an organization this year. We were able to take that from accounting, so you'll see a corresponding reduction on their side. For risk management, that fund is funded basically from the general fund, but it is a way that we can account for and clearly tell you exactly what the cost of risk was to the organization. And then technology enhancement. So Tanya Buckingham will come and tell you that she is going to very graciously give you $200,000 from her technology fund for operations. And so when that money is transferred over to the county, it goes into the county's version of the technology fund that is housed within finance, though you typically won't see any spending for that from our office. Typically that'll be from IT or the appraiser or GIS. So our budget request, you can see the changes in personnel, contractuals, and commodities. Those percentage changes on commodities, it's awfully high, but you can see it's not a lot of money. And again, it's just shuffling based on where we think our actual expenses will be for calendar year 2020. So shifting to accounting, that's on page 77 of your binders. Accounting's mission is to assure informed financial decision-making and the proper use of public resources by Sedgwick County government. Of course, they do general accounting and financial reporting. Again, payroll, workers' compensation. Accounts payable is that function that exists to pay our vendors on behalf of the county, because we do have a centralized function there. That division also oversees banking services, investment and cash management, and grants management. And of course, you all get a quarterly report from us on investments, and then Rick will talk about that in each of your quarterly presentations. And so you'll get more updates on that actually next week. So accounting's 2020 budget request is shown here. Again, they work out of 2 funds, the general fund and the workers' compensation fund, because workers' compensation is administered under accounting now. It used to be under our risk management section, but due to some reorganization, that's now in accounting. And you can see how that looks by fund, but overall relatively flat. So here is their budget request. You can see it by personnel, contractuals, and commodities. Those are the only areas that have any budget. And you can see that in contractuals, their amount is down slightly this year relative to 2020's request, again, because $200,000 went from accounting to the CFO office to pay for that contract management implementation. We do have a couple of decision packages within finance. Both of them are related to accounts payable. And so you can see that on page 510 of your binders. There's actually quite a bit of backup documentation for both of these decision packages if you're interested in the details. This first decision package is similar to what you heard from MABCD yesterday. Essentially, right now, we only have one level of account payable analyst, and what we would like to do is to be able to promote those folks, create a new classification so that when they've been here for a while and when they are performing at a high rate, that we can promote them and give them some additional pay. And we hope that that will help with retention, because within finance, this is our highest area of turnover. But it also has some of the greatest effect because, again, our vendors rely on getting paid in a timely fashion. And if we can't do that because of vacancies or because folks maybe aren't trained yet, that hurts everybody. And so we want to be able to give some incentive to folks to stay and perform. And so this budget request is relatively small, $14,800, because it would just be paying for those folks to get to the next level. So decision package 2 is an accounts payable administrative position. These aren't necessarily high-graded positions in the first place, but they are doing an awful lot of administrative work at the moment to basically track down invoices, make sure everything was done properly, reconcile things where there may be differences. And what we are concerned about is that if we don't have, if they continue to have that administrative work, they can't focus on actually getting the bills paid. And so what you can see in your backup is that we do have delays in processing, and we're implementing a number of pilot programs now to try and help that, so to hopefully alleviate this need. But for now, we want to do something to try and speed up that process. And so we think having a slightly lower level position that could handle that more administrative work would be useful. And so you can see the total cost for that is $49,542, and that is salary plus benefits. So they do have 2 decision packages. Together they total $64,350. So shifting to budget then, page 83 of your binders. Budget's mission is to allocate resources for basic and essential services while maintaining long-term financial health for Sedgwick County. Probably the core thing that budget is responsible for are those certified budgets that get turned into the state mandated by August 25th each year. But there are many other important functions that are served, including the financial forecast development and maintenance. Any program analysis, those folks are talking about doing things differently or adding things. We hope that they engage budgets so that we can understand how those things might impact other folks and also plan for that fiscally. We look at budget administration and monitoring within budget, and then of course the monthly, quarter, and annual reports that you all get. Budget is 100% funded from the general fund, and you can see what their total budget looks like, and here's how that's broken out by category. Relatively modest budget for sure. It's almost exclusively people that comprise the budget for the budget office. So shifting to purchasing, their mission is slightly longer, and I'm going to try not to mess this up when I read it. To facilitate the procurement of all necessary products and services for Sedgwick County while adhering to all applicable rules and laws governing public procurement in order to protect taxpayer funds through prudent and judicious expenditures. And so, of course, their primary obligation in purchasing is to adhere to your purchasing policy, which is a charter. The purchasing charter, Charter 68, and so not only do they actually implement those things, but then they make sure to get out and train folks in all the departments so all the departments know how they can be successful with that policy. They facilitate the requests for proposals, bids, and information. And just as a reminder, proposals and bids require funding before they go out. Requests for information don't require any funding. They're simply opportunities for us to identify ways to do things. They also facilitate the process for informal bids and proposals, and very importantly, manage supplier relationships, so that if there's an issue between a department and a vendor, we can get ahead of that, work through it before it gets to your attention, certainly. Again, like budget, purchasing is 100% funded from the general fund. You can see their total request here, and this is how it's broken out by function. The personnel difference here is more significant than you'll see elsewhere, most specifically due to turnover. We've had a number of folks turn over in that area in the last year, and so of course those fluctuations will impact the overall personnel budget, especially since it is such a small group. And then a minimal amount for contractuals and commodities. When we do have the mandatory publications and things, the bulk of that does get paid from this contractual budget. So in summary, for finance operations, our total request is about $7.65 million, which is just about 1% less than it was for the 2019 revised. We did have 2 decision packages, both in accounts payable. And now we're going to shift over to budgeted transfers. Unless you have questions, I can answer on finance operations.
I have one question.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman. On the days to pay, the average number of days to pay the, I'm going back to the decision package number 2.
Sure.
What's the average days of pay in the process now? What's the process time currently?
Hope, do you? Here, let me come up. We'll let Hope Hernandez, our accounting director, answer that question for you.
So I've always been told Sedgwick County is wonderful in this area.
Hi, Hope Hernandez, Director of Accounting. Right now, we're between 45 and 60. We'd like to be at net 30, but with our shortage in staff and retraining, we're about between 45 and 60 days paying on those.
Yeah, that's good information. All right, thank you. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Okay. So moving to page 104 of your budget books, then, this is called budgeted transfers. So those of us in finance really like to make it as complicated for you as possible. And so we talk about transfers in two different ways. There are budget authority transfers, and then there are real transfers. So budget authority transfers are simply shifts of budget authority from one place to another to accommodate someone to spend money in a different way than was originally intended. And there are some rules for that by county policy. If we're doing that and it's greater than $250,000, we always have to come to you for permission. Then there's some degrees below that where staff can approve it with notification to you. These budgeted transfers are actual transfers of cash between funds. And if you remember from the property tax lid discussion, and we kind of talked a little bit about state budget law, anytime we transfer cash between funds, it has to be authorized by state law in the first place, and then you all have to accomplish that by signing a resolution. It requires that level of attention. And so what we do here is we set aside $1.5 million through the budget process, sometimes more, sometimes less, but in this case this year we're asking for $1.5 million. And essentially, we go ahead and say, we know there's going to be some areas of the budget where we're going to need to prop them up through cash from the general fund. And so as you can see here, the bulk of that goes to risk management. As we just talked about a minute ago, we have that risk management fund center within finance operations. Those expenditures occur there, but then at year end, we make sure that fund gets reimbursed. Again, it's more because we want to be able to account for that specifically and show you exactly what the cost of the risk is to the county. So the bulk of budgeted transfers happens for that reason. Then we also have the remaining amount up to $1.5 million available in case there are mandatory grant matches that maybe we don't know about yet. A good example used to be the Violence Against Women Act grant that the DA's office received. We didn't know each year how much that would be, so we stuck a pot of budget authority here to accommodate for that. We no longer get that grant, but if we ever chose to pursue that one or pursue others, this would be a pot of cash that would already be earmarked for that purpose through the resolution you adopt to adopt the budget. And so again, that request is $1.5 million for 2020. Yes, sir.
Lindsay, in some of the presentations, we see kind of a previous trend in the last 3 years, 5 years. Is this risk management fund of $1.2 million, is that consistent the last 5-10 years? Or? It
had been for the most part. The issue is that within the last 2 years, we have transitioned away from having a risk manager. And as you've seen, we kind of have workers' compensation and payroll, and we have some risk management functions within the CFO's office. And so as a result, those total costs have gone down. And so there's been a slight trend downward. But overall, I would say in terms of the actual settlements we pay and some of the property insurance, it's been relatively flat. Okay. If that answers your question.
Yeah, because it's
and we can get you those details.
The budget request, you don't know what the end of the year will be.
Right.
But I just was wondering, so this $1 million has been a consistent number?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I would say it's been even less than $1 million the last couple of years. But
well, good.
I don't want to jinx anything.
No, I know. Knock on.
That's right. There we go. Okay. So contingency reserves is next, and I did promise you during your property tax lid presentation that we would talk a little bit about this, because I do bet your eyebrows go up a little bit on some of these requests. But what I would remind you before we get into the details on this is that, again, state law tells us that we can only carry forward 5% of our fund balance that's not allocated. And so what that means is, in addition to wanting to have plenty of opportunity to cover our expenses for emergencies and things in case they occur, we also want to make sure that we're allocating budget authority so that we're not in violation of state law. And so a significant portion of this is related to that function as well. So what you'll see is that the operating reserve for 2019, we're proposing to go up to $9 million. Now, I guess I should tell you something else too. So if you look at your contingency reserve section of your book, you will see that the 2019 adopted amounts are actually significantly more than what you see in this 2019 revised column. Because what has happened so far this year is we have already accessed the reserves, and so that budget authority now shows up elsewhere within the budget. And so to that extent, the operating reserve was closer to $8 million when we started the year. It's down to 6.7 now. And so as we move through the year, this revised number will change, but there will always be a corresponding increase elsewhere within the budget, and folks will explain that if we need them to as we go through the process. So for the operating reserve, we're shifting it up to $9 million because it's a nice even number. If you look at your adopted column, you can see it's kind of a random number because over time, this is typically when commissioners make changes on the day of budget adoption. This is where those changes either come from or go to. And because we've had flat targets over the years, it's just been kind of this weird number. So we decided to clean that up this year. The BOCC contingency normally is at $340,000. Again, just purely because we wanted to make it look a little nicer, we bumped that up to $350,000. Public safety went up to $1.4 million a number of years ago, specifically because $400,000 was allocated by the commission for some initiatives that were related to the EMSS Coordinating Council, kind of some of those things you've been hearing about, optimized deployment, and some of those things were already in discussion several years ago. We just didn't know how that was going to look. And so this, because that is basically over with, that EMSS Coordinating Council, we're returning this back to its original amount of $1 million. And Commissioner O'Donnell, to your point yesterday about EMS and Clearwater, this would be the source for that budget authority if it was necessary. Now, the general fund reserve used to be called the rainy day reserve, and so policy actually still refers to it as the rainy day reserve. But that rainy day reserve is essentially used it's set by policy that it may only be used for certain things. One-time costs, to start up programs, or to fund capital improvement projects, things like that. And so this had been $10 million historically. It was reduced down to $7.5 million a few years ago. This would return it back to its historic level. And again, it provides some of that budget authority that we would like to have, again, because of that 5% cap on what we can carry forward without allocating. Now, the CIP reserve is something that was set up several years ago, and what it was intended to do was basically capture the difference in budget authority from year to year that was not going to debt service. But we have not done that quite with the fidelity that was intended at the beginning. We have never accessed that contingency, and so rather than having that $356,000 of budget authority simply sit there at the same time that our debt service costs actually for 18 to 19 went up because of that extraordinary bond redemption, we want to just go ahead and zero this out because it's not really existing for its current use, and if we do decide to use it, we would want to engage much more with you on what that ought to look like instead of kind of this random number we have from a few years ago. And then finally, the compensation contingency has changed in purpose over time. Right now, its intended use, as requested here, is for FLSA. So we know that there's going to be some changes to employees' exempt versus non-exempt status. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, and we know that we won't know probably until the end of this year. And so as a result, we have just set aside some budget authority to accommodate for that.
It's like there's some beeping in this room, and my ears are and I'm like, what the hell is the beeping?
Well, that's no fun. I'm sorry.
Like trying to shut it off.
Okay.
Well,
I'll try and speak more loudly to cover up the beeping, I guess. So shifting to the next section then is bond and interest, which again is our debt service. This actually has its own tab in your budget binders. And you can see that for now we've got $20,000 budgeted in contractuals. Again, this is for smaller expenses associated with advisements on debt issuances or how to handle debt. Debt service interest, you can see what it's budgeted at for 2019 for interest and principal, totaling $18.884 million. Again, for 2019, we do plan to pay off some of our debt early to avoid about $700,000 worth of interest costs over the remaining years of the life on that bond. And so what that means is we're going to have a healthy spike this year, and then in 2020 it'll go back to more normal levels. And you can see for now we've got some estimated nice round even numbers in there. But as we get closer to budget adoption, we'll work with our municipal advisor because we do know we have debt issuances planned for the end of this year. We want to get this more specific to what we'll actually need since that'll happen around October. And so this number will likely change before you see this in the recommended budget. So then shifting gears yet again, back to your culture and rec tab in your budget binder, we're going to talk about the Interest Bank Arena. The arena's mission is the Interest Bank Arena is a modern first-class sports and entertainment venue owned by Sedgwick County and operated by SMG, providing 15,000 seats for basketball games. The Interest Bank Arena is home to indoor sporting events, concerts, family shows, and other entertainment. And you can see what their current budget request is. So this is a combination of two things, both the capital improvement program that they submit to us that is mutually approved by the county and the arena, as well as the naming right contracts that we receive and then remit to the arena for use in tickets for those folks, as well as other operational needs that they have. Now, you'll see that this number right now says $2,975,000. We've already given you a heads up about some potential changes to that capital improvement program request from SMG. They are still working through those details, and Tom and I actually will come walk the halls with you on that once we have those final numbers to get your feedback on that. But this could be another potential area of the budget that could change depending on your feedback.
Lindsay?
Yes, sir.
Would this be a time to suggest anything related? I just saw the email this morning where we have our payment from the casino. And I know since I've been here, there's been a concern about sustaining the maintenance, but you know that balance that keeps going down. So I'd been thinking about it a little bit. $1 million. How much is it come? About $1 million? No.
We get about $1.8 million per year.
Million per year, and I understand it goes into the general fund, and so it's really not targeted for anything specifically. So my question is, could we consider a growing scale to take part of that casino payment, because actually the casino does take some of our events from our arena and for that matter Century 2 and anyway from our county, and so I think at any time, Michael, you might remember 89 or 92% of the casino revenue is Sedgwick County resident.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that, 93 or something.
Yeah, and it's well over 80.
So anyway, so I'm wondering if we took, for instance, 100,000, or I mean, just scale it up to where all of a sudden we're at a scenario where maybe nearly half of that, 800,000 or 900,000 of the $1.8 million goes into this reserve. It's the long-term sustainable to help build that, to keep the maintenance and the capital improvements and all that stuff. I don't think we need to do anything today, but if you inch that up.
Well, I think if there's general consensus among commissioners that you'd be interested in seeing what that looks like, we could certainly start developing some forecasts with that included. To say if we do maybe $250,000 the first year, and then, like you said, ramp it up to where maybe it's eventually half to start going to that sales tax reserve, so that there is some funding there for capital improvements for the arena in the long term. That would certainly be something we could look at and do if that was the will of the commission.
Yeah. Theory is it's kind of an entertainment venue down at the casino. It's entertainment dollars, and we're worried about our entertainment venue here at Interest Arena, and how do we kind of balance that out with and sustain it. So just a thought to throw out there for consideration.
No, absolutely.
Well, I do kind of like that idea, especially because I know in one of the budget requests we were looking at some expenses. I think, is it for the figure skating deal
right.
that's coming
$400,000 in EcoDevo in 2021.
So it would be nice if we had a pool where then when we have events like that, we take it out of a designated fund instead of the actual operating budget. I'd like to see some scenarios what that would look like. It's a pretty good idea.
But
Be
for
happy
the
to.
figure skating, we plan on, if we do get it, recouping 100% of that money.
Well, sure.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's really not something that we're planning on spending.
Sure, but if we had a designated pot of money where we're able to grab for events or things to do with entertainment, it'd be nice, because that's a steady stream of income we're going to have.
Certainly.
Just for the discussion.
That money is the most spendable in terms of, it goes into the general fund, we can use it for anything. So we
Correct.
could use that money for mental health, for example, or,
Yeah.
treatment programs, or aging programs, or, all kinds of things. It's in the budget now. It's being used now. So to an extent, I view that money as a property tax reduction revenue. If we didn't have it, we'd have to have a higher property tax. And so,
That's not true.
well, if we didn't have that revenue coming in, we would have to either have less programs, or we'd have to have money from elsewhere. So it's, in a sense,
I
that's...
wouldn't raise property taxes.
Okay. Now, money's not being spent. It's being used for services now, correct?
Within the general fund, yes, it is being used. I think with this, if we did a phased approach, hopefully there would be enough offset in the assessed value to where the general fund wouldn't necessarily see an overwhelming impact. But that's why we would potentially do that forecast modeling to see what that could look like.
And I think one of the other things we've been talking about, at least some of us have been talking about, is trying to see some of that revenue help the fire district. I know right now legislatively you can't get there, but I think there's a model. I've talked about the model. If we ever get back to that, there's a model where that revenue from the casino, we do provide a service, fire protection services to the casino. I'd like to see some revenue going to the fire district, or at least say our fire protection services from Sedgwick County have some of that revenue, because that would be fair. And
Well, perhaps we should table this and have a discussion as to what the priorities are for that money. It seems like we can go back and forth over what we want it to be used for, but is this the place to have that discussion right now? That's my
Not
question.
necessarily. That's why I'm.
Look what you started, Pete.
Well, I introduced
Pete.
with the reserve. Speaking of reserves, with reservation, but I think it'd be healthy. We could have a great discussion about it for sure.
I don't mind information. I think if he's asking for information, I'm supportive of that.
Okay.
But I don't think we're making a decision right now.
Right.
And,
No.
the interest bank arena was designed to be self-sustaining. It wasn't. I think that the reserve fund eventually will hit zero. We have a decision to make at that point. Are we going to support that with property tax dollars? And I think that day is coming. It may be 10 years out, maybe longer. We don't know. But eventually that day will come. And so that's a good discussion for someday. I don't know if that's today, but
I would agree. That's
Yeah, I'll end my thoughts by saying I remember when that happened about 8-10 years ago, whenever the casino went in. And I remember that the county and of course Mulvane and Sumner County were each going to start receiving a coupon of payments, just receiving a payment. And I remember asking David Unruh at the time, Commissioner Unruh, I said, so God, what are you guys going to do with that money? He goes, well, I don't know. I said, wouldn't you want to stick that in reserve for something? And at the time, he says, well, I think we're just going to stick it in the general budget at the time. And so it's just part of a revenue stream where it was new money, quasi-free money. And so anyway, and the concern about interest arena. So I just was connecting the dots on some.
in my mind, I think we have some consequences of having a casino. It's entertainment for many, but it's also has created some gambling addictions, things like that. Maybe some other issues potentially that have been affected by the casino.
Sure.
So I think there's some cost to Sedgwick County as well, which is why I think we received some of the money, is because number one, a lot of money is going from Sedgwick County to the casino, and this is a way to replace that. But I think there are things in our community now we're dealing with as a consequence of that casino, and that revenue is there for us to address that. Maybe that's mental illness or substance abuse treatments and things like that. There are consequences, and so that money is in our county, and we're providing services to the best of our ability. But that money is part of our revenue stream, so it's a very complex discussion. And anyway, I don't mind free information. That's fine.
Well, we'll do a wrap-up session at the end of this series of presentations, and we can talk about maybe the next steps forward on how that can look at that point. So getting into another super just non-controversial subject, economic development. Back behind your community development tab in your binder, page 591. So the mission of economic development is to develop and sustain a strong and diverse regional economy by working with regional partners to attract and grow talent, enhance opportunities for businesses to retain or attract new jobs in the region, support healthy, vibrant communities, expand the county's tax base, and promote initiatives to enhance our quality of place. And so we do have a few programs, maybe not quite as clearly defined as, Division of Finance Operations, but certainly Brent and Tasha evaluate business expansion and retention projects in concert with partners, especially GWP. They analyze requests for supplemental funding from external agencies. So, for example, when we were looking at things like Boundless Playscape, Dock, Aviation Museum, he'll go out and contact those folks to do an analysis to understand what that return on investment might be to the county, or if there's other intangible benefits that we want to make sure that you consider. They'll do that work and bring that to you. And then finally, provide support of non-governmental business and economic development organizations. So you can see that there, within your budget binders, actually, we break out the programs in a couple different ways. First, of course, is Economic Development Administration. And so you can see that this is a hefty amount, $1.95 million, but we do not forecast to spend that amount. So in 2020, you can see the request and contractuals is about $1.8 million. Of that, we only forecast or plan to spend roughly $500,000. Of that, $400,000 would be for membership with GWP. $60,000, at least for now, would be to continue our membership with SCED. $40,000 would be to go to the export plan with Kansas Global, Karen Page. Now, I would point out that we did have a 5-year agreement with them for the export plan. That 5th year is actually 2019. But we do know that when she came and spoke with you all last year, she had some ideas and initiatives of other projects. And so for now, at least, that $40,000 remains in the forecast. And then finally, there's about another $6,000 worth of miscellaneous expenses for things like economic development conferences, trainings, registrations, things like that.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you, Lindsay. Is this a good time to ask
Yeah,
questions?
absolutely.
Are you sure?
Whenever you
Done?
want.
Are you done?
It's your show. I'm not done, but
No, finish.
Do you want to ask about SCED?
Yeah,
Oh,
but I was just
I
wanting her to
was going to ask
proceed.
about SCED too. so-
Okay.
well, now seems like a perfect time then.
Okay, perfect. So we're GWP has asked us for $100,000 more.
Yes.
So pretty sizable increase, and I'm open to that. They've done, I think, a pretty stellar job and come up with great ideas and abilities to partner with us. I still continue to question SCED and their entire identity and a few other organizations that if we do proceed with the $100,000 increase, I'd be more interested in seeing moving that money out of other areas in economic development. That's just me. I haven't talked to any of my colleagues about that. So, thank you.
I'm glad you brought SCED up because I still do not know how that's helping us in economic development. And I do understand how that GWP is helping us in economic development. So I kind of share Commissioner O'Donnell's concerns about SCED.
Well, we do know their fiscal year runs from July 1 through June 30, so it might be a good time here in the next few weeks maybe to have them come in and do an updated presentation.
I don't know. They've come quite a few times.
Yes, they have.
Hate to say I don't want them to come, but what are they gonna? Is there something new that you're aware of that we need to know about?
If Brent is in here, I will defer to him because I believe you're on their board, are you not?
Morning, Brett.
Good morning. One of the things, I think SCED's focus has been on the loan programs and things for the smaller businesses, and GWP has been a little more focused on some of the larger things. One of the things that SCED is working toward is a new loan program that would bring more dollars into the area, focusing on small business and small business startups. And one of the goals, it's a long-term goal, is for them to kind of move to self-sufficiency so that they can begin not to rely as much on the government monies. But in terms of goals for that and timelines, I really can't speak to that at this time. But it is a place that they're trying to head to.
Well, if they have a place, why can't we see if they can have a place under GWP so that we're all working in the same direction? I don't know that we need this separate organization doing something, duplicating effort, or even if it's not duplicating effort, not focusing all of our attention in one direction.
Agreed. And I think there's been some effort at the different groups, Workforce Alliance, SCED, and so forth, to work with GWP more and let them be the, if you will, the umbrella organization for economic development for not just the county but the region, so that we're not duplicating efforts, because it's very frustrating for three people to go in three different directions, but everybody's supposed to be doing the same thing.
Well, this is the third year that I've sat through a budget, and it's the third year that I've said I don't understand why we don't have a unified strategic plan for economic development.
And it's the third year you've asked if SCED's getting ready to evolve.
Yeah.
And I would add that the evolution of what GWP has done, mainly with dominantly privately funded investment now, it seems to really have a positive impact on what's going on in the whole region. And I would agree with what you're saying, and I think GWP, the last meeting we were at, they continue to have more financial participation and with companies, and they're all driving towards the same even though they compete against each other, they're all driving towards the same goals. So,
Chairman, I've probably been one of the most critical up here of SCED, and I would just remind ourselves that they did get a new director about a year ago. And last time we spoke with him, he talked about stripping off the weatherization. That sounds funny. Moving this with the weatherization and the grant funds to cities away from their focus and do more on the small business side of things. And one of my criticisms has been they've not had a long list. They don't have much of a list of accomplishments or successes to speak of. But last year we were willing to say, this is kind of it. You're going to have to find some performance. If they have things to report, I would like to invite them to come back and report that.
Okay.
I think we owe it to them. That's what we said a year ago, is if you can fix it, and come back and let us know. And so a year ago, we kind of given that ultimatum, and I think that right now, if they have things to report, let's hear from them. If they don't have things to report, then I think I'm done. So in terms of creating jobs and helping small business, it sounds great. Let's see where we're at. And if we have things from the new director, I would love to have him come and share that.
Okay.
Is there a breakdown of what this $1.9 million encompasses? Like, how do we, where does this money, what does SCED get? I know what GWP gets, but...
Let me make a copy for you. So that 1.9 million, we only plan to spend 500,000 of it. The remainder is budget authority. Again, we need to allocate certain amounts, and so this is an area where we allocate it. One, because if something big comes up, this is a pot to go to, but two, it's within finance, and so it's harder for people to spend.
We don't know what's coming up during the year, opportunity-wise.
Right.
New expansion.
Right. If there was ever an incentive or something that we wanted to give. Now, Spirit's a bad example because that was $7 million. This pot wouldn't have been big enough.
Okay,
but in the past, when there have been things like FIGIAC and things like that, this would be a pot of money or NetApp to give a smaller subsidy from, as long as they met the criteria. Although I think generally as a commission, this commission has kind of moved away from that. But this would be the resource for that. Now, I do have this list which shows how much we forecast to spend of that $1.9 million each year, and so I will just email this to you all so that you can see what we do plan to spend. The rest is just budget authority sitting there.
Okay. And that lists SCED and everything?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And was Karen Page going to come back and have a formal request with us?
As far as I know,
I think so, yes.
Okay.
And so actually, do you have any other questions for Brent? Or okay, you can go sit down for now. Thank you. I reserve the right to call you back if necessary. Okay, so we do have two other small programs within economic development that I'm going to hit really quick so I can get to wrapping up. First is the Foreign Trade Zone. Again, Sedgwick County acts as the administrator for that. Brent has moved more fully into that role this year. There may be some changes that come on that, but we'll come and brief you on those if that occurs. It's really just a repository for funding. We never really spend much out of this, so it's just a placeholder in case we do have some fees or things we need to pay. And then finally, economic development grants. If you remember, we used to have a microloan program that was operated on our behalf by SCED. Over time, though, that program really became obsolete because other entities were able to provide riskier loans to small, very small businesses, which is what this had been designed to do. And so there was no applications for the program any longer. And so last year, the commission took action to basically pay back the amount of money that we had received from the state for this. And we're out of that business entirely now. So that's why you see that was there for the 2019 budget, but it's gone for 2020. And you all have already taken the action to eliminate that program.
Question about that program. Was that the one that was just Shawnee County and Sedgwick County?
No, we still do that, and those are the basically mortgage programs.
Right.
Those things we still do, although there's much less activity in those.
Right.
This was a completely separate program that was designed for small business startup when really all members of a company made less than a certain amount of money. That was the only way to become eligible, and so the owner and the employees. So that program has now been replaced by private entities that can provide similar services, and so that is the one that we walked away from.
So the home program, the one that Alan Cobb was working for, the Shawnee and Sedgwick County, that still
occurs, and that any revenue that's received from that is actually deposited in the CFO's fund center in the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure this is the last one I have to talk about, yes, and then I will get away from the podium. So as you know, we just talked about in our briefings this week, WSU does have 1.5 mills that are levied on its behalf through our county. And each year they provide to you a synopsis of how they intend to spend that money. They have submitted that so far for 2020. I will tell you there is one exception. We had not given them updated assessed value information at the time that they provided this request, and so we have adjusted their contingency to a higher level, basically to show what that increased revenue is that we believe that'll be there. When we finally get assessed value estimates on June 15th, we'll reach out to them and see if they want to tweak these numbers any further, and that will be what's shown in your recommended budget. But as you can see, for 2020, they have increased the amount that they plan to go to capital improvements. Everything else but that contingency remains flat. And so as you may recall, we do get funding for 2 full-time interns from the WSU mill levy proceeds. We also get $80,000 per year for special projects. It's not necessarily cut as a check, but we're allowed to engage WSU for special projects to help us with things like the strategic plan, for example. And so that is funded from there. And so other than that, their budget really has not changed much. And I understand they'll come and brief you on these details here within the next week or two. So with that, I'm done, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Yeah, our total support to WSU kind of gets lost as a result of you reporting at 2 different places.
Right.
Is there any way that we can list those supports somehow?
What we could try to do, and this gets somewhat complicated, but over in the debt service fund, we could certainly try, and for the higher level projects, maybe amounts that are of a certain threshold, we can break out how much we're paying of our debt service each year for those projects. And so that would be the place to maybe capture that roughly $3.1 million per year that goes to fund the NCAT facility that we pay out of our bond and interest fund.
Well, maybe if you just put another slide.
Oh, in this. Oh, okay. I thought you meant your budget book. Oh, yeah, I can do that here really easily.
I don't need you to break it out in here, just as you're briefing us.
Absolutely. I can do that very easily. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Questions for Lindsay? I don't see any. Commissioner Meissner said he wants another bagel.
So a couple minutes for a break.
Oh, we're going to take a couple minutes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim, are you next?
Okay.
We're
Morning,
on
Commissioners.
page 33 for the County Counselor's Office. You're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Papoon, Interim County Counselor, here to present the County Counselor's Office budget. I'd first like to thank our budget folks, especially Carly Sanchez, who helped us put together, did most of the heavy lifting on this budget, along with my staff. Our mission and services is to provide high-quality, nonpartisan, emphasize nonpartisan, legal services to the County Commission, of course, the other elected officials of the county, county manager, his staff, and department heads, advisory boards, and anybody else in the county that needs quality legal advice. We have a staff, our office administrative staff is six positions, full-time positions to keep the office flowing, help us with all of the day-to-day filing, contract management, putting together our budget presentation, all the things to make the office run smoothly for the attorneys to be able to do their work. We have, when fully staffed, 7 full-time attorneys. Right now, since beginning of December, we've had six full-time attorneys in the office. But fully staffed, 7 full-time attorneys. These attorneys provide, of course, verbal and written opinions to all the folks we represent. We do a number of contracts, resolutions, review policies. We represent the county in county court. And, of course, we do some litigation, appear before some administrative boards, and we also review claims and try to mitigate any liability for the county. We believe having an in-house legal staff performing these functions reduces liability for the county and serves the county's best financial interest by doing these things and hopefully preventing lawsuits and preventing other legal liability. Some of you are probably aware, maybe not the newer commissioners, but we have a county court. This court was created via statute in Sedgwick County in 1993. I believe there are 11 counties that actually have the statutory authority for a county court. We created a county court because prior to that, the only way we could enforce resolutions of the Board of County Commissioners was to go through the district attorney's office. And the district attorney's office obviously has a number of very important crimes and other actions to prosecute, and county court animal control issues, parking, those kinds of things aren't as high a priority for the district attorney. And so we created the county court so that we would have some enforcement powers on the legal actions, the actions that you guys take. This court, by the way, we staff with one of our attorneys Monday afternoon. Michael Fessinger is currently doing most of the prosecutorial work in our office on that. We also go for external counsel and legal expenses, basically outside counsel. Pursuant to our charter resolution, the county counselor has the authority to hire outside counsel to do legal work. It's primarily to be used on specialized legal matters or opinions where maybe our staff just doesn't have the legal expertise to address a particular issue. We're hoping to minimize use of counsel in this area, but we also use it for litigation, any kind of serious litigation in which the county is a party or county officials or employees are a party. We generally hire litigation attorneys to do the work for us there. Now, we have an attorney position that does function the majority of his time as a litigator, but a lot of it is jail claims, pro se type complaints, or to assist outside counsel to keep our costs down in these areas. And I'll be happy to address why we use outside counsel in this, but it's a very specialized, attorneys that do litigation are very specialized in this function and need a lot of support staff to be able to perform this function for the county. As far as quality performance, some of the things that we did in 2018, our attorneys performed. We keep track of our time and what departments we're performing services for. We spent over 12,000 hours last year performing services for county officials. In 2016, there was a survey which indicated that 98% of the people that were questioned were satisfied with the services of the county counselor's office. This was a year after I had left, so I'm sure that bumped the figure up a little bit. And that survey hadn't been conducted for about 10 years, so we may need to do that more regularly. We, I think, monitored, approved, or drafted 795 contracts last year. That's not on the slide, but we did that. And we have an attorney, Trish Parker, who works with the appraiser's office, and in the contested commercial values last year, she worked with the appraiser's office and commercial taxpayers and was able to maintain 94% of the value that was prescribed by the appraiser's office. So that takes a lot of work.
That's good.
This is all budget stuff. Apparently, all of our, and I'm sure Carly put this in here, all of our services come out of the property tax funds. And for all of this stuff, you get it for, in 2020,
Low price.
essentially the cost of the casino funds for 1 year, I might add. But, in 2020, we are expecting that the cost will be $1,720,093, which is a reduction of almost 0.5% from 2019. How our budget is broken down, we have no decision packages this year or no alternative reduction proposals, but how we break down our budget is in personnel, it's minus 0.63% expected for 2020. I'm not sure why that went down. I will add it. It's not reflected in this budget, but we have saved the county a lot of money by operating one attorney short for the last 5 months. Contractuals, these involves some of the monies we have to settle cases. I have the authority to settle cases of up to $25,000 for general liability issues or up to $100,000 for workers' comp claims. Involves seminars, training, travel, our membership fees, the Kansas Bar Association, Wichita Bar Association, our online subscription fees, and when we hire expert witnesses, many times in consultation with our outside counsel in cases, and that sort of thing. And that is expected to drop 3.61%. Commodities, we are listing at $48,604 for 2020, up 33.87%. And I think part of this increase is expected because we've been operating a case filing system with the district court for a number of years, and that is changing. They are going to an Odyssey case management system, and we are right now working with the district court to see how we can be involved in that system, but we may end up having to do some sort of a hybrid system and go on our own as well. So I think some money has been built in there, and that's for the county court system. But it also includes our books, software, technology equipment, office supplies, and repair of equipment. And so all of that totals, again, our 2020 request is $1,720,093, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Papoon? Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you. Mike, I know your predecessor had done a lot of outside counsel. Is that included anywhere, a breakdown? Because I know you had told me that you were looking at limiting the use of outside counsel.
That would fall under our contractuals, Commissioner, and we do show a reduction there. I will tell you that use of outside counsel is something we don't have a lot of control over, because the vast majority of it involves how much litigation the county gets in. Hopefully, if we're doing our job, the county won't get sued very often, but we can't control how many lawsuits are filed in a given year, and the more filed, the more outside counsel costs we're going to have. We can control, though, who we hire to just give us the general legal opinions or help us with just areas, terminations, things like that, and that is something I intend to keep at a very minimum and only use outside counsel. when we need a special expertise, maybe a particular business, a knowledge of business, complex business negotiations. Over the years, we've had to discuss matters with patent or copyright attorneys. There are certain attorneys that have an expertise that we just generally aren't going to have, and we may consult them for opinions. But and we will endeavor to keep those costs down. We have our staff is very competent to handle any kind of general county legal issue. So.
Right. Yeah, and I did see that. It looked like about a $12,000 reduction, but that's just an estimate.
Yeah,
and you're assuming
that's probably the most fluid area of our budget is.
Right.
If we got a rash of lawsuits, we would probably be having to come back and ask for more money in that area, and hopefully we won't, and we can return money in that area.
On page 37, Commissioner, is summary of actuals of 2018, what we have for 19, and also what he's projecting for 20.
Okay. Thank you.
Good.
Well, Mr. Papoon, I appreciate what you do and what all your attorneys and your staff does for Sedgwick County. I have met more attorneys in the last 2.5 years than I met all the previous 70 years of my life. I think we're probably the greatest economic driver of attorneys in the state, but I'm saying that facetiously. I'm sorry. I do appreciate what you do.
I can't speak for all of them, but I'm sure they appreciate it too. But no,
Mike, I would, as a new person, it's been comforting to deal with you and your staff. My attorney experience is watching a lot of TV, but other than that. But anyway, thank you. It's been comforting for sure.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't solve things in an hour. Thanks.
Okay, up next we have Culture and Recreation. It'll be on page 555 of your binders. And I'll turn it over to Tim.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, Whoop. How come? Lindsay wants us to have color ones.
Do we need two of them?
That's really good stuff.
All right.
This is so much stuff. Killing lots of trees today.
Morning, Tim.
Good morning, Commissioners. After the Mike Papoon stand-up routine, I don't know how I'm going to compete with that, but I'm going to talk about a lot of different things, culture and rec related today. And then I'll come back on Monday to talk about health and human services. Some of you may remember last year I did like 130 slides in a 2.5-hour block. Broke it up a little bit this time. So we'll start on page, what page are we on? 154? Okay, thank you. We're going to begin with culture and rec, and we're going to cover the parks, both Lake Afton and Sedgwick County Park. We'll look at Sedgwick County Zoo. There are some culture and recreation community programs. We'll talk about Exploration Place. We'll go over the Extension Center, and then there are some community development community programs as well. On page 544, we start with Lake Afton Park, and the mission for the parks is to provide a recreational experience that's attractive, safe, and efficient by providing facilities and events for the public to enjoy. As a reminder, Lake Afton Park is a 720-acre site with a 258-acre lake. It serves visitors and guests from across Sedgwick County and the surrounding region, and it's park maintenance. Parks.
Thank you.
The budget request for 2020 supports Lake Afton Park and its 55,000 visitors per month during peak season, and it has multiple playgrounds, modern bathrooms, climate-controlled meeting rooms that are rented out. and fishing and boating available as well. We also have a store at Lake Afton Park, and that store was reopened a few years ago, and the first 4 months of this year we had the highest total revenue that we've had since the store reopened, about $66,000 this year. So the store is a well-needed and well-received amenity for guests out at the park. And also included in this budget is some funding that we received from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks related to fish that we use to stock both at Lake Afton Park and Sedgwick County Park. So the budget request for Lake Afton Park is $649,236, so that's a flat request. And you can see how that's split up there. Most of it is personnel, and then we've made some adjustments between contractuals and commodities. Any questions about Lake Afton?
Don't see any.
Is there a CIP request for the Lake Afton coming up? Or
There will be. The CIP is going to be covered on Tuesday, and there are a number of different park requests in that CIP.
what's the situation with the Judge Riddell Boys Ranch property? What's the status on that right now?
We have a plan to enhance that area and make it available. We're going to put the basketball goals are about ready to go. We're going to refresh the diamond, the softball baseball field area, and we've got some more ideas. And so we're going to be able to do some stuff even this year, but then there's a long-range plan that you'll see in the CIP projects as well. But it becomes part of the park property. We're going to take the fence down and roll it into the rest of the park property.
Okay, so it still is fenced right now?
It is right now. The gate's open, so people could go there and use it. Once we get the basketball goals there's going to be a bigger reason to go.
Okay, thank you.
Sedgwick County Park is a 400-acre park that also includes 4 small lakes, and also included in this conversation we'll talk about Northeast Sedgwick County Park, which is 656 acres of parkland as well. Sedgwick County Park was visited in 2018 by almost 1 million guests. There again are multiple playgrounds, bathrooms, climate-controlled rooms for rent, and there are a great number of large and small community events, walks, runs, where that park is used over the course of the spring, summer, and fall. And we'll also talk, this budget also includes the Special Parks and Recs funding, which are liquor tax dollars that come back from the state, and we spend that money both at Sedgwick County Park and at Lake Afton Park to enhance the parks. And you can see a list of some of the projects that we've done in the past with that liquor tax money. The request for Sedgwick County Park is $343,161. Again, a flat request, and most of that again is in personnel. We do have 2 decision package requests for the parks. First one is for an additional building maintenance worker, and since 2008 we have seen a couple of different things that have happened that have really impacted the parks system. In particular, we added the boundless playground at Sedgwick County Park, and that drove a lot of traffic into that park. It created another maintenance opportunity for us as well. We've got a lot of equipment now that we maintain there. And then we added the Northeast Sedgwick County Park property. And so that is additional property. We almost doubled the amount of space that we have for Sedgwick County Parks. And it takes staff to maintain that. And so that's the request here. What we're actually trying to do is take a quarter-time position. It's really tough to hire somebody 10 hours a week and expand that to a full-time position. And the price tag on that is just under $47,000. And here's an example of some of the work that park maintenance staff do. That top picture is a bridge that we have on our list to maintain. We need to put a new roof on it. We need to completely redo the bridge. You can see there's been some repair done there, but the picture on the bottom is an example of a bridge that the park maintenance staff went through and refurbished, and they put a new roof on it. It looks great. It's smooth. It's going to be
Why is there a
comfortable.
Is that a siren?
siren? Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Might have been a train.
A train?
I'm not sure.
To be in a,
Okay.
It hides the beat.
This
Are you
bridge,
giving us an example
this,
of what's gonna
this
happen
bridge
there?
is going to handle a train once we remodel it.
Oh, okay.
We did that for
You guys are
you.
messing with my ears today.
Lacey keeps hearing things nobody else can hear.
Maybe I'm crazy. Ooh.
So this is an example of the work that our staff do. We just need more staff to do more of this type of work. There's a lot of work out there to be done.
Is that included in David Spears' list of 600 bridges in Sedgwick County?
Well, now he's got 605.
He does not own that one. That's stepchild.
That's right. And the second decision package that I've got tied to the parks is a refresh of the master plan. In 2008, there was an architectural firm worked with a number of stakeholders and developed a master plan. And since that time, we have, like I mentioned, seen the Boundless Playground added. We have started the Sedgwick County Art Walk, but we continue to have requests about parks and park lands, and this master plan extends beyond the park all the way west to Ridge Road, and so that's where the ball fields are and that sort of thing. And so we would like to go back to that firm and have them refresh the park so that we know where we want to go next with park development.
So is that just Sedgwick County Park, not the northeast one?
Well, it may cost us a little. Right now, what we had thought about doing was just refreshing the stuff there at 13th and Ridge, but we could probably negotiate to add the northeast as well. That would be a good idea.
I would voice that I think a fresh look at the Northeast. What do we do, or what do we not do, or let somebody else do with that? That might be, Tom. We could get some federal assistance with that, besides what the chairman's been doing with our elected federal people. But I think maybe we can use Richardson, the guy I was telling you about in Washington, to help.
Solar panels, throwing them out. I don't mean to interrupt you, but if there's anything that we could do,
any ideas?
if we could,
Does-
I know that there's some, what is the land encumbered? Is that what it is?
Encumbered.
So it's encumbered, so we have to figure out that issue, or, what we'd like to do with that property. I've heard people want to sell it. I've heard, whatever the case may be, but I do just want to bring up again, Washington County in Maryland, used 130 acres of their land for solar panels and are now covering the cost of their electrical costs for their county due to those solar panels. So I don't know if you guys have been covering or watching or listening to what's going on at Mays High. They just now put out their solar panels and are recouping some of the energy costs from that. So I think a discussion is warranted. I would absolutely agree that we could revive it in some way, shape, or form to understand how to use it best for the county, and I would love to get that on the calendar soon.
Very good. We've got a list of the park events, some of the park events in there. There's almost 30 things going on, and they begin in February and end in November and cover almost every weekend in between. So again, the decision packages for the park, the building maintenance worker, and the master plan, total of $56,096.
Hey, as far as the Boundless Playground, I know you need to add an additional maintenance worker for the whole park, but part of that is to help with that new Boundless Playground. Do we also need money put in there to maintain that equipment, or is that already in your budget?
Well, we've handled most of the maintenance issues through Mark's regular operational budget. He spends a lot of money on repair of all the playground equipment and that sort of thing, including the stuff at the Balance Playground. In the CIP that you'll see on Tuesday, we've included refreshing that rubber surface because that's really a big ticket item. And so we're planning for that as well. We're trying to fit that into the right areas of the budget.
Okay, well, it's a nice playground. I just want to make sure it's maintained. The second thing is, does Van know when we're going to do the ribbon cutting on that?
The Boundless. There was a meeting yesterday that Kate was involved in, and I think that we're now targeting maybe September.
September. We keep moving it back.
We do.
Okay.
But there's construction going on right now. There's a kind of an expansion. We replaced a couple of different playground items that were kind of worn out, took the sand out, and and there's new playground equipment being added there.
Yeah, I thought we had a date, though, for the ribbon cutting for that.
We did, but I think that it got moved yesterday.
Okay. Another question, talking about ribbon cuttings. We've got that new turtle maze over on the other side of the park. Are we going to do anything with the arts folks on doing ribbon cutting for that?
We will. The second sculpture is about to be installed. It's a much smaller scale one. It's called a crane dance. It's going to be a 12 or 15 foot tall, 6 foot wide, that will have a mosaic on it. And I think we may want to wait until that's done, because I think that'll probably be done in the next 30 or 45 days. And so once that's done, we probably want to do some kind of an event for those two items.
Good. Okay. Any other questions from commissioners on those?
How do you count the number of people who visit our Sedgwick County Park? Where does that 900,000 number come from?
We use the same kind of counters that David Spears uses on roads. So we count the number of cars that are in and out, and then there's a mathematical formula that we apply to that. And I don't have it in my head, and Mark may have it in his head, but
absolutely.
I'm going to let Mark tell you what the formula is.
They come in, they come out.
Come on in.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
We have traffic counters located at the north and south entrance into the park. We take that number, we divide it by 2, and we take that number times 2.1. That 2.1 is the average number of people in each vehicle that comes in and out of the park. That's how we come up with that figure.
It's maybe low. Usually more than 2, I think 3 or 4.
Is there a certain time of year that you do that? Do you
Year-
do it at the same time of
We
year
do
round?
it year round, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Only time we take them out is when snow time, so the snow plows don't tear the tubes up, but
Okay.
that's year round.
So every time I go in and out of that park, I'm being counted?
That's correct.
Okay.
But the thing we don't capture are the people that actually come in from the neighborhood surrounding on the paths, because there's people in that park all the time.
So people bicycle into the park, they wouldn't be counted unless they go
No.
across the tube.
If they don't drive a vehicle in or out, they don't get counted.
Oh,
And
wow.
it would be very difficult to try to track that.
That is low. Is there a way to capture bicycle traffic? Because it seems like, with the push to ride more bikes, I mean, you'd think that we are missing out on some of that.
Traffic counter, David?
Not David Spears, not that I know of. There have been counts on the paths around Wichita and all, and it's done visually, volunteers.
Yeah, Wampo does it twice a year, I think, and they have volunteers randomly out there at strategic days and times a day, and they calculate. It is manual.
David's folks do a great job of maintaining those paths, although I did get a phone call over the weekend about a large bump up by the extension center. Have you all looked evidently why? It's pretty significant.
It's the bump right at the entrance where the path connects to the entrance, and we've fixed it several times. I'm sure that's the one again.
Yeah, can we fix it again?
Yes.
Can we fix it so you don't have to fix it several more times?
No.
Job security
It's a-
for the
it's a-
engineers?
It's a long story.
You do make an excellent point. David and his staff do a great job at the park, at both of the parks. They do a lot of help. They provide a tremendous amount of help, and they keep the place in good shape.
You're not going to congratulate him on the new bridge?
No, we're taking credit for that.
You're taking credit for that.
Yeah.
All right,
And
the other question.
Van confirmed that we were going to do the ribbon cutting in July, and they've asked us to move it to September. So we'll do that in September for the Boundless Playground.
Okay. All right. I don't see any other questions on that. You ready for the zoo?
We're going to talk about the zoo next, and their new mission is inspiring respect and conservation of wildlife and wild places. And they serve the residents of Sedgwick County, surrounding communities, the region, and we'd like to get more statewide traffic through our zoo. And they provide learning opportunities for guests, the community, and schools. And they're also most interested in the highest standard of care for the animals that are there in their environment. They remain the number one outdoor tourist attraction, and that economic impact number is $43 million based on the folks that come through there. And the zoo is an example of a public-private partnership. Most of the folks out there are county employees, but we've also got Zoological Society employees that are partnered there, and we have a great partnership with the board of the Zoological Society as well. And we picked out a little piece of their strategic plan. They just wrapped up their strategic planning process, and this is kind of the focus on animal care, and you'll see why when I get to the decision packages, but they want to continue to prioritize humane, appropriate animal care practices, and then add animal enhancement opportunities as well, and make sure that the community has an opportunity to learn about appropriate animal care as well. So that's an important part of what they do out at the zoo. They served 504,000 guests, almost 80,000 students were involved in field trips, and this budget also includes the second year of funding for the zoo entrance complex. And the budget request is almost $8.6 million, and that does include that $2 million for the capital improvement tied to the entrance. There's also $400,000 in contractuals for other capital improvement projects. We look at their CIP list, and then we split the amount that they have each year as well. As I mentioned, there is one decision package for the zoo. It is to add an additional zookeeper, and the intent is to do two things. One, reduce the number of overtime hours, and the other is to help provide support to the existing zookeepers. The routines that they take with the animals become more and more complex every year as folks learn more about animals and how to care for them appropriately. And they're to the point now where they use a significant amount of overtime. In 2018, there was an expenditure of $168,000 in overtime at the zoo. About half of that was zookeepers, and so this would help offset that some of that overtime and allow them to continue with the highest quality care for the animals. Any questions about the zoo?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Culture and Rec community programs, the mission for that budget is to enhance the quality of life in Sedgwick County by supporting cultural, entertainment, recreational, and related educational opportunities of citizens and visitors. This community program fund center, we use it to provide funding to local agencies for cultural and recreational activities. And we've got a number of great partners. One of them came in yesterday and talked a little bit about TCAM as one of the folks that we fund here, in addition to the Sedgwick County Fair, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Historical Museum, the Arts Council, and River Festival. And these attractions are available to all citizens and guests in the community, and each of these nonprofit organizations is governed by an independent volunteer board. And again, this is a nice public-private partnership that we can be very proud of. Here's a list of the funding, and the one change that you'll see from 2019 revised to 2020 budget is a reduction of $100,000, and that represents that funding that we did with Sedgwick County Fair for that building in 2019. Everything else is going to be flat for 2020. The fair operates this year, July 10 to 13. They see between 25 and 30,000 visitors each year, and they have all kinds of different opportunities for vendors and guests over that 4 days. TCAM, as I mentioned, was in yesterday. They are the premier location for learning about the rich African American history in Kansas, and they offer both permanent and traveling exhibits, and they're located in the former Calvary Baptist Church within the courthouse complex. Almost 6,000 visitors there last year. The Wichita Sedgwick County Historical Museum preserves and presents local history, and they are located in the First City Hall, and they offer permanent and seasonal exhibits and had about almost 15,000 visitors last year. The River Festival will be May 31st through June 8th, and we have a small sponsorship opportunity with them. And then the Arts Council advocates for arts and artists in the community, and most recently we partnered with them on a couple of different sculptures now in the Art Walk at Sedgwick County Park. And as I mentioned, we'll have that second installation is going to happen, I think, probably in the next 30 or 45 days. And the request is $317,472, same amount that we've had in 2018 and prior as well. Any questions about any of those?
Don't see any questions.
Okay. That's all contractual. Expiration Place, their mission is to inspire a deeper interest in science through creative and fun experiences for people of all ages. Expiration Place is a private 501c3 not-for-profit institution that's governed by their own self-perpetuating board of trustees. Again, it's a public-private partnership. In this instance, we've got one county employee who is here, Jan, and this may be Jan's last opportunity to come to a commission budget hearing, so thank you for coming. And again, the Expiration Place is supported by the county contribution, admissions program fees, memberships, and voluntary contributions from a variety of different sources. Expiration Place is Kansas' premier science center. It offers a lot of different hands-on exhibits and a full schedule of traveling exhibits, permanent exhibits, and then dome theaters as well. They are also committed to either renovating or creating about one permanent gallery each year. The really significant one was Design, Build, Fly, but there's a refresh of Where Kids Rule, and they're working on their next new permanent gallery, which is Heads Up Health, and so we'll see that over the next year or so. And again, it serves citizens and guests from Sedgwick County and across the state. They do outreach all over the place. They serve almost 300,000 people between on-site and off-site, and a number of educational programs throughout the course of every year and the summer. And the other thing that I think is really important to talk about with Expiration Place is how they fit into this community in terms of STEM education. They are an opportunity to catch kids' attention at a very early age and help them become part of the future workforce at all the primary manufacturing companies that we have in this town. It's a manufacturing town, and it's important to get kids interested in science and technology, and I think Expiration Place does a great job of that. And sometimes kids see something there that will trigger them lead them into a career at one of our aircraft plants or other manufacturing opportunities here. They do that through partnerships with schools, homeschool groups. They served about 88,000 children last year in educational programs. And the funding request is part of that. We've got a 5-year funding plan at $2,220,140, and the bulk of that is contractual. And then, as I mentioned, we've got one employee there as well. Any questions about Expiration Place?
Are the 88,000 students included in the 297,000?
Yes, they are.
I don't see any other questions.
Okay. The Extension Council is another partner that we have in the community. Their mission is they're dedicated to a safe, competitive food and fiber system and to strong, healthy communities, families, and youth through integrated research, analysis, and education. Sedgwick County Extension provides practical, research-based education for individuals, businesses, and the community, and helps develop skills of youth and others. They have 5 different focus areas: water, health, global food systems, growing tomorrow's leaders, and community visualization. A number of their programs you're going to be familiar with: 4-H, youth development, the agricultural and horticultural support that they provide, family and consumer sciences, and then community development. And their programs are supported, designed, developed with research from K-State, and the Extension Council works in partnership with Sedgwick County, the state of Kansas, and the federal government. And their board is comprised of 24 elected members, and they represent those 4 different categories. And then they have an executive board as well.
And we don't serve on any of those boards? We have no one from Sedgwick?
We do not.
We do not?
No. They have an open election process, and I don't know that, I certainly haven't ever made myself available for that.
Is that statutory that...
It is. Their process is state statute, how they go through that process. And there are differences for multi-county versus single-county extension councils, but it's statutorily driven.
But my only concern is that we're giving them almost $826,000, and we have no one that serves on the board to see how that's spent.
That is correct. Now, I have an opportunity to participate in their meetings. I was a part of the process where they hired
We're not
their...
a voting member. We have no control.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. And there's no possibility of change that we could have someone that we could appoint to that board?
We wouldn't be able to appoint anyone under the current statute, but I mean, it could be something that we may want to pursue on our legislative agenda, or we could talk to them about the election process.
Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, when we had talked about this before, I know the Farm Bureau is pretty active in that and selecting the council. And from what I had heard, and this, I believe it was when Mick Roush or Kent Winter was the chair, they would welcome and invite a commissioner to sit on that. And then the smaller, they have the election that anybody can participate in to go and vote there at the center out of that 24 to select for the 9. But the Farm Bureau, I think we brought it up at a lunch a year ago with them.
Okay.
So
that's something we probably ought to pursue.
Sure.
We give them a lot of money and we have no representation.
No, they love us. We have the nicest building in the state. We fund them to an extremely high degree. They want us to be more involved. And their new director, Jennifer, has offered as well. David and I went out there about a month ago.
Yeah, I'd like Exploration Place. Commissioner Howe serves on that. We have people on a lot of...
I think we should make that an imperative that we get somebody. But they do work with us pretty well and really appreciate it because, not only do they get that $800,000, but we give them a building that's, I don't know how much it costs. David Spears probably remembers, but it's a very expensive building.
It's a great facility, and they've done a nice job of the grounds around it as well, and we do maintain that facility very well.
Yeah, I'm not saying I have any concerns about the direction we're going. It's just that if we're providing that much service, we probably ought to have some representation, at least be able to feedback. If something's going on at Exploration Place, for example, and I'm just using that as an example, Commissioner Howell, tell us what's going on.
Right.
Commissioner Cruz.
I think that's a really great point. In Harvey County, they have a food and farm council, which Senator Carolyn McGinn actually serves on. So understanding how locally sourced food, that's something that I would like to see them. I know that they're already kind of doing that, but I wonder how we can incorporate something like that so that we have less transportation costs. There's tons of local growers here in town. That's something that I think if we could push them towards. So I'd like to explore that a little bit more. I'm not trying to add more boards or more anything, but I think it's important for us to understand how locally sourced food can grow our economy. Also, that relates to health. It relates to all sorts of things. So if we could talk about that, and I think this is a great place to put that. I mean, I am curious as to what this $825,000 is going towards. So you bring up a great point.
I'll become more familiar with their election process and talk to Dr. Brantley as well.
Very good. Any other questions on the Extension Council?
I'm curious, are these, is this council a statutorial created board? I mean, I view this as a board, but rather than making appointments, they're elected, and the previous commissioner called it a shoebox election. Even though you could be anywhere in the county and be elected to it, that typically isn't what happened. There's just virtually no communication or advertisement, and anybody could run, but I don't think it's well known. And so they do have access to quite a bit of money. I'm curious about maybe if it's not statutorily required that we do it this way, maybe we should challenge that as a front-end discussion, perhaps.
We'll bring back some additional information. We might do a white paper on this topic, so we'll get you some additional information. But some of the things that they do work on and the results that come from that money that we provide them include the SHIC counseling to Medicare beneficiaries, helped 7,500 folks save $4.3 million. The Master Gardener program, there's over 300 really passionate volunteers that work across the community. And the 20,000 hours that they volunteer is the equivalent of almost 10 additional extension agents. There's $60,000 worth of fresh produce that comes from the local Plant a Row for the Hungry program.
Are these page numbers? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Slide 38. It says the Extension Council budget is page 455.
585.
585. Well, what's this? What's that reference to?
I think that's the farmer manager's hearing binder. And I think the page numbers probably just didn't get updated from
Oh gosh.
that binder
Okay.
to this.
So it's 585. Okay. Thank you.
And I apologize for that if our numbers aren't matching up. The Extension Center served 3,700 youth through different outreach programs, and they focused on healthy aging, a variety of different classes that they offer, aging, baby brains, and basic budgeting. And that request, again, is $825,481. That number's been flat for a number of years.
And that's where the contractuals come. I mean, to me, it's like I see $825,000 under contractual services, and then that's what you're saying we can't see because they don't provide that to us?
This is one of those funding arrangements where we in the budget book, it appears as a contractual payment, so we pay them that $825,000, and then they spend it based on the direction they get from that elected board. So if you would like a detailed Extension Center board, I can get that for you. It's going to be a number greater than the $825,000 because they've got other sources of income as well.
But we could get the breakdown of what this $825,000 goes to. Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
get that.
Thank you.
Certainly. Community development, community programs. There are two different programs in this area.
Before you go on to, let's stay on Extension Council for just a
Okay.
second before we skip ahead. Commissioner O'Donnell and I took a tour of it recently, and they do a lot of things that are outstanding for our community. But in some cases, it may be duplication, or maybe we don't have the ability to capitalize on what they do. The SHIP program is fantastic, but our Department of Aging probably ought to be involved somehow. Some of the Better Brain for Babies, our health department ought to be involved in some of that. The programs that they were explaining to Commissioner O'Donnell and I a lot of cases, we're doing that someplace else in Sedgwick County too. So somehow we need to work together on this rather than trying to duplicate efforts.
Well, and I think one of the important words in their title is extension. You know, they do some things that are beyond what we certainly don't have the capacity. The aging staff do SHIC counseling as well. We certainly don't have the capacity to serve the numbers within aging that get served through.
Maybe we need to advertise it through our aging department, through our senior centers. I don't know that the health department's involved in it. There are different departments in Sedgwick County that really could be impacted by what they're doing over at the Extension Center. Everything they're doing there is fantastic. I'm not complaining about that. I just think that somehow we need to work together better. And again, if we had somebody on the board, maybe we could say, hey, we're duplicating effort here, or you can enhance the efforts of things that we're already doing.
I will tell you that the Extension Center is one of those organizations that collaborates with a lot of different folks across town, including other county departments. So we've got connections between Department on Aging and the Extension Center and Health. We do make those connections. Now, I'm not saying that we couldn't do more, but we certainly do make those connections as well.
Okay, well, I know they certainly impressed Commissioner O'Donnell and I on what they're doing. I just was sitting there looking at what they're doing and say, wow, we're doing a lot of the same things.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt that there are things that both organizations do.
Okay. All right, we can move on.
Hopefully, page 589 has some community development programs. The mission there is to recognize the important role that specialty organizations play in providing services to enhance the quality of life for members of our community and help attract families to the area. We provide funding to two different organizations that have an ancillary impact on county operations. We provide funding to the Sedgwick County, or the Wichita Transit Authority, for the Oaklawn Sunview Transportation Program, and that serves an economically challenged part of the county that does not have access to, wouldn't have normally have access to Wichita transportation system, and so we make transportation services available to those 3,000 folks in that community, allow them to participate in the city bus service. And then we also provide support to the mediation center, and they do training, volunteer, and they coordinate volunteer mediators, primarily in conjunction with small claims court, and that helps keep pressure off of the district court. And in 2018, the Transit Authority provided 1,500 rides to those folks in the Oaklawn Sunview community. Request there is $46,795, and that is the same as prior years. Any questions about those two organizations?
What's the total we provide to Wichita for Oaklawn?
$38,795.
$38,795. And we only had 1,538 rides?
We had 1,500, yeah.
What's that come out per ride?
Probably 22, maybe. I'm looking at the math people in the room.
It's fairly. How much is it per ride?
31.
$31.
38,000 divided by how
Is there a
many
cheaper way of doing the same
1,500.
thing? $38 a ride is quite a bit.
$25 a ride.
How much?
$25 a ride.
$25. That's still a lot of money. Is there a cheaper way of doing the same service for those people? Have we looked at any alternatives then?
I think that this is probably the least expensive opportunity to provide transportation in a managed way for folks in that particular area of the community. It might be possible to get ride shares for a little bit less. It becomes much more complicated to manage that process. I don't know that there are other. We'll certainly look. We've got an aging transportation brokerage, and they do transportation all the time. I'll talk to them to see if there's any new alternative that would be less expensive. I don't know that there is one.
Well, running a big bus down there and we're only getting 4 or 5 riders a day average, I just don't know if it's the cheapest way of doing it.
How does that compare with the ridership elsewhere in the community for these buses?
And we're not paying for the ridership.
I understand.
elsewhere.
I understand. I'll just throw out there and say, one of the challenges, of course, is this bus doesn't run late in the evening. It doesn't run super early in the morning. They have, I think, if I understand correctly, I think one route in the morning, one route in the afternoon. And if you miss that bus, you're going to end up walking to 47th and Hydraulic probably to catch the bus down there at that quick trip. There are people who do that because the bus just isn't running at the right times. And I know there was an offer as well of doing some on-purpose trips, like say to Derby for shopping, things like that. Is that included in that ridership? Because they know they have that option.
I believe that it is.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, they know it's a very expensive service for what they get. Now, I would just say this though: there are people here that are dependent on that ride to get to work, and this community doesn't have a lot of options. So that's my reason for continuing to support this. I think that they are very dependent on this, and Plainview is very similar to this. But Plainview is inside the city of Wichita, so they run a bus right through Plainview by their normal contract.
I'm not saying we shouldn't help the folks down there. Don't get me wrong. When Commissioner O'Donnell and I were in D.C. last time, we rode Uber, and what was it costing us? $7 or $8 a ride? And we were taking Uber. Maybe Uber's an opportunity to do the same thing and get it for $7 or $8 a ride.
No, I just want to point out, though, that when you don't have any money, $7 or $8 is a lot of money.
No, I'm not saying
pay
that.
For a ride.
I'm not saying they would pay the $7 or $8. We're paying $25 a ride right now. Is there a program that we could put together where that they could take an Uber and save us $15, $20 for every
or
ride?
Lyft? We won't discriminate against.
I'm not talking about
No, I know. I'm just saying. Uber and Lyft, same thing.
I would think the only issue with that is that there'd be a whole lot of abuse and people would be using that all the time.
I would call that a transportation voucher, is what I would call that. And I'm not saying that that's not a bad idea. I would tell you that Uber, Lyft, and regular taxi cabs really, frankly, are not drastically financially different. If you get in that vehicle, I don't know how far you're traveling in Washington, D.C., but if you're in Oakland and you're traveling into Wichita, you're not going to get into town for $7 or $8. It's going to be $20-something. And the reason I know that is I've ridden those things. The cab fares and Uber and Lyft are not drastically different in terms of cost. And so, just to get in the cab and go in a mile is going to cost you $7 or $8. But if you go 10 miles, it's a lot more. And I'm not sure the right answer. But you're suggesting a voucher program of some sort. And I'm open to the idea, but this community absolutely needs help.
Yeah, and I haven't said that I disagree with you at all on that. But
Gotcha.
I don't know that even Wichita is being able to recoup the cost of running a big bus through there at $38,795. So there may be some expense to Wichita too, where that they could share with us some way of doing something.
Commissioners, we've done some research on this. We've got a white paper. We'll get that out. We'll refresh the numbers on it, and we'll get that to you as well.
And one other I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is a very complicated topic. Transportation, as you mentioned, is very expensive, and specialized transportation like this, where you don't have high volume, it's expensive to deliver. But in some instances, it's absolutely critical to those folks, and there's just not a lot of access.
The other thing I would say is that this community used to access the Derby and the South Side at Oliver and 47th, the WATC facilities. They've both closed. And so now the nearest facility now is at Harry Street Mall. Again, it's just harder for them to get there. So they used to walk to those other facilities, and now they can't. Trying to better themselves, if they're trying to get to a class, it's virtually impossible, especially when those classes are in the evening. These buses stop running at 6:30 in the afternoon or 6:30 in the evening. These guys are getting out of class at 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock. They can't get home. So it just seems like these evolutions of things we're doing. I mean, it makes sense in some ways, but it also makes it harder for these folks to get out of poverty and to find a way to get to work and get to school. It's just piling up, and it's really hard for them to know how to get out of that situation and better themselves when they can't get to a class or get to work. So,
I just don't want inertia to drive the direction we're going. If there is a better way of doing something, I want to make sure we do it a better way. Let's just don't put something in the budget every year and just say, hey, we've taken care of the problem. Commissioner
Thank you.
Eisner.
Listen to the conversation. I think it's important for the commission and us to realize that one of the 30,000 foot level problems is that Wichita Transit is one of the few transit areas in the whole country that's owned just by the city. Thus, they're determined by the rules of the federal transportation policies that limit Wichita Transit to just the boundaries of Wichita. And that's why when that was, the federal did an audit, and that's where a few years ago you realized going outside the city limits and helping seniors and everything else, as well as the Oaklawn, was in violation of the transit boundaries. So I would be a big fan of going to a regional transit authority, but that's a big deal. But that's what most other major metropolitan areas do. For a top 50 area person, we can go to a regional transit authority, and that way we're in it. Derby, we're all in it together as a transit authority, and then that expands all these things you're talking about. Meanwhile, so that's the big picture, but that's why we're handcuffed with our citizens that live outside the boundaries of the city limits. It just is that way. So until that changes, we're limited there. The other thing is Mike Tan, who's the transit director, has come up with some very creative and improved ideas. So it would probably be worth us that are concerned with how do we options that can provide better service. He's expanded routes. He's expanded hours in some cases. He's delivered students to NCAT facility up there and all over, depend on demand. He's expanded it to even provide rides for USD 259 junior high students that can get home. That was never done before. They just show their ID and they get on for free. So Mike Tan is a very creative person. He comes from outside, comes from Pennsylvania, where he brought in fresh ideas. So I would encourage whoever our point person is, we get Mike Tan to understand our concern on this and see what he would suggest as options, and see if he's got some new things. So thanks for letting me kind of share a little background.
We could get Wichita just to annex Oaklawn.
Yeah, could do that. Could ask.
You'll make that happen?
Well, I don't know if I can, but we could ask.
All right, sorry we've digressed.
That's okay. We'll talk a little bit more about transportation on Monday, because Aging does a lot of the transportation for the rural part of Sedgwick County, and then they're also involved in the CTD, the Central Transit District, that covers a number of other counties as well.
Right.
The summary for this presentation is $13,064,038. So again, a flat request. And the decision packages are 3, building maintenance worker, the master plan, and then an additional zookeeper, for a total of $109,684. And I'm going to ask one more time, questions?
Questions for Tim? Well, you're getting off easy.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Maureen, what you got for us?
That's our last presentation this morning. We have a break until 1 o'clock, and we'll be back with Public Works.
Public Works. Are you going to be exciting, David?
Oh, yes.
We know you will be.
We'll see you at 1.